So, the Civil War. Indeed, the momentous events of 1861 to 1865 hold paramount importance in American history. On the one hand, it was almost predetermined this clash between the North and the South simply had to happen due to the economic, social, moral, and even aesthetic differences. The disparity was staggering, and it was only a matter of time before eruption. However, was it really inevitable that this conflict would evolve into a gruesome war of such scale? That is a question for scientists to debate, yet it seems the answer is yes. I, of course, always aim to avoid conflict. By the way, this position of mine somewhat resembles that of the character Red Butler from Gone with the Wind, played by Clark Gable, a sober-minded realist who did recognize the incommensurability of resources between the North and the South. The material gap was so vast, it was obvious that one way or another the North would prevail. So, why did it happen? The reasons, as I said, lay in the vast social and economic differences. For instance, the South opposed the trade tariffs with Europe because their industrial production was negligible, and they wished to preserve stable prices. Meanwhile, the North was technologically advanced and the tariffs worked to its advantage. That's the difference. Raw materials on one side, modern technologies on the other. The Southerners stood to defend their plantations, latifundia, against the infringements imposed by northern settlers, who claimed the right to possess their own patch of land. As for the slave labor, please don't even start with that. This, my dear comrades, wasn't even a side issue. It became the waving banner later. Nobody considered it when the whole thing began. 1 or 2 years after the war broke out, Abe Lincoln used the subject as a political curveball to secure European sympathies for the North. You see, Europe hadn't yet decided which side to favor. It could have gone either way. England and France were in a dire state over cotton shortages from the south, especially after the North set up a naval blockade. It's a long story, but that's the main plot. Besides, today it is only the Union that remains. Every piece of legislation passed by the North, including the abolition of slavery, was absolutely unlawful and unwarranted, because only the decision of some of the states were taken into consideration. The opinion of the southern states was neglected. So, if we examine the subject through historical retrospect, as we always must, it was utterly illegit. With that in mind, now, more than 150 years after the events, the United States has constructed an elaborate ideology around the war. It has been mythologized. However, I must strongly emphasize this. It is incomparable with any event in Russian history, especially when it comes to war, be it the Civil War, the Second World War, or the War of 1812. Why so? Because our mythology is of a very different nature. Every lie is deliberate. More than that, facts are not merely manipulated, they are extemporized. Such a phenomenon has never occurred in American history. Certainly, some emphasis, some layers have been shaped by ideology, but nothing approaches the depth of falsehood we see in Russia. This defies all comparison. What more can I say? Curiously enough, though few ever bother to mention it, the Indians largely supported the southern states. Indians, just think about that. Despite the North enduring halo as the abolitionist crusaders, the Indians mostly sided with the South. Interesting, isn't it? That's because the way the North treated the Indians was far from being nice and pleasant. Now, on to Lincoln and the abolition. It's not some tidy tale, but a long and tangled story full of reasons why he came to that choice. In fact, Lincoln never remotely foresaw the horrendous situation we find ourselves in today. When he set the blacks free, his intention, and we have this on written record by him, was to send them back to Africa. He never meant for them to stay, not a shred of such intent. He even wrote that they are not to integrate or being part of our society. That was Lincoln's position, and yet people laud and vaunt him, completely unaware that his views on the matter were hard-boiled and brutally realistic. Curiously enough, it seems that no one, not even the supposed intellectuals, bothers to think about this. But let us compare how did blacks behave in America before and during the war, and how do they behave now, or during the 20th century, especially in the 70s or 90s. People today seem to have forgotten those violent seditions and terrorist attacks that tore through America in the 70s and beyond. What I'm trying to say is this: when Africans remained slaves, they didn't plunder cities. Not a single street or police station was set ablaze. Their favorite pastime, knock out the whitey, didn't exist. But now they're free, and just look at what we've got. It's not like I'm some hoary old relic, but I do know history, and I can still recall the time when some people actually worked for a living instead of leeching.
Так что вот такая вот история, да?
That's the story in a nutshell. It's my usual approach whenever I receive questions like yours, answering from a different angle than most do. Otherwise, what's the point of parroting someone else's opinions?